This week on Aristeia 101, we're talking about Assault. Assault is one of the original scenarios that'll come in the core box of Aristeia. Now, this is probably the first one many people have played. Certainly it's the first one I played. And when you've got, I'm going to say about an hour, hour and a half usually, this makes for a very satisfying game between you and your opponent. Now, first thing we got to mention is that you will be deploying in opposed deployment zones. So that would be Zone 1 and Zone 4, Zone 2 and Zone 5, or Zone 3 and Zone 6. The underdog chooses which deployment zone to start in, and then their opponent chooses the opposite one. After choosing, the underdog decides which player deploys a character first. Afterwards, both players will take turns deploying one of their characters one at a time until all their characters are deployed. What is nice with Assault is you deploy in or adjacent to that particular deployment zone. So that's all the hexes within it and all the surrounding hexes, unless they are blocked with an obstacle or a blocked space. First round, very easy. The central zone, which has the A logo in it, will be the scoring zone. At the start of each subsequent round, before the planning phase, the underdog chooses that round's scoring zone, but only if at least one player scored victory points in the previous round. If neither player scored, the scoring zone remains basically where it was for one more round. Only a deployment zone with no characters inside at the start of the round can be chosen as the new scoring zone. Should all deployment zones be occupied, the underdog may choose any of them, and then place all of the characters that are inside it on free spaces adjacent to the zone. Now I do want to talk about really quickly, if, say, you are in a position where you can score, but you think that it's going to go poorly for you once things switch. There can be value in delaying scoring. This is a odd strategy I've used before. Sometimes it'll work and sometimes it'll backfire. And it very much depends on kind of how the game's going and who your opponent is. But I have deferred scoring before just to keep control of the zone a little bit longer, because I see where then my opponent can put it. They're too built up. It's not going to go well for me. So I don't want to gain 3 points and give them 3 points. What I do is I delay it, draw it out one more round, but I get myself in a better position for where I think it's going to happen next. Or I take out more of their team so they're in a weaker position as well. It can be useful, but again, it can backfire. Speaking of which, deployment from the bench. Characters may return from the bench using any deployment zone except the current scoring zone. Now, the important thing with that is you can actually go into a scoring, you can go into a deployment zone that has other characters in it, both friendly and enemy. And one of the easiest tricks you can do is deploying someone right next to an opponent, and they immediately have to deal with that right then and there. Sure, your character coming back from the bench is going to have -2 energy, but generally speaking, they'll have 3 energy. That's an attack or an ability at the very least. Furthermore, the opponent might not be at the advantage in that case, because, well, they're going to have to get away. So, or they have to attack you to try and deal with you. That limits their options. You're kind of taking away some of the good ones, or at least not making them automatic. So if they want to try and leave, they will have to make a disengage roll. If they want to attack you, they'll have to spend action points. And, you don't always want to attack in Aristeia. That's just how the combat system works. There is a risk and reward to that. Now, the important thing here is the objectives. During the objectives phase of each round, check whether either player has achieved any objectives. Award them the appropriate victory points if they have accomplished the following. If there's only one player with one or more characters inside the scoring zone at the end of the round, they'll get 3 victory points. Very nice. Having more characters inside the scoring zone at the end of the round than the opponent will get 2 victory points, but only if both players have at least one character inside the scoring zone. So basically, one player has 1, the other player would have 2. If one player has 2, the other player has 3. You see how that goes. If it is a tie, having the same number of characters inside the scoring zone at the end of the round as the opponent, it's 1 victory point, but only if both players have at least 1 character inside the scoring zone. So if it's 1-1, 2-2, 3-3, then what'll happen is, well, you both get a victory point, which is kind of something to shoot for sometimes. Now, the trick with all of these is there's kind of some give and take with it. If you have if you get 3 victory points because you're the only player with a character in the scoring zone, there's a good chance, and you need to watch this, that's going to swing underdog to the other player. Should that happen, they're probably going to pick a scoring zone they think they can get 3 points on as well. So the other 2 situations where it's either one player is outnumbered or it's tied is a little more preferable if you want to keep things on a little more even footing. Meaning, yes, the underdog might change, but at least you know that they have 1 or more characters stuck there as well, so you both kind of have to scramble. This kind of balances things out nicely. It gives it a nice, it certainly gives a nice feel to the game. Now the end game conditions, it's got 2. The game ends as soon as either player scores 8 or more victory points, or at the end of the 5th round, whichever happens first. If it's at the end of the 5th round, the winner is the player with the most victory points, and in case there is a tie, the winner is the player who collects the most frag tokens. Now this is a place where I've seen people lose sight of the objectives, where they focus purely on frags. That will generally not win you the game. Now that said, I've had a number of games, and as have the rest of the guys, where it's very close and you start looking at the points and like, gosh, there might need to be a tiebreaker. How am I doing on frags? So you can go purely objective, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But if the more and more you think the game's going to be close, the more and more those frags are going to matter. So you can't ignore frags in favor of the objective, but at the same time, you cannot concentrate solely on frags. Whenever you do decide, okay, I'm going to commit the resources and I'm going to frag someone to send them to the infirmary, it should be purposeful. There should be meaning behind it. And certainly removing a character off the board is meaningful. Don't get me wrong there. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's worth the effort you're spending either. So if you're going to go ahead and I'm going to commit all these resources to taking someone out, well, going after Maximus means you're going to be throwing a lot of resources after him. He's hard to kill. Going after Gata, who is a scorer. Now that makes a little more sense. Do they have someone on their team who's very good at support? Say Hannibal, say Lakshmi, Bachman. He's horrifying. Taking them out could put you in a better position for the following rounds. There have been times where I would actually go for slightly lower point score with the objective for that round, just to take out a very specific target that I knew was really going to wreck things for me. Now, like anything else in this game, that is a gamble. That can backfire on you just as easily as it works for you, depending on the skill level of your opponent. Assault is, again, it's a 16 to 90 minute game. It is long, and I like that about it because it becomes interesting. You've got enough time for the minus energy penalty to start falling off of characters. You have time to develop things going along. Also, some play styles, if you're rapidly going through cards and such, you do need to have a pacing and thinking about, am I going to play this tactic now, or am I going to wait? Because when we get to rounds 3, 4, and 5, am I still going to have gas in the tank? Additionally, when you are playing during a round, really around in the third turn, when you're flipping over your third Aristo, you should really be thinking about, how am I setting up for the next round? So towards the second half of round 1, it's like, okay, what do I want round 2 to look like? What am I planning to do there? Get to round 2, halfway through, okay, round 3, what's happening? Things should be changing, things are dynamic, and you want to think a little bit ahead. You can't ironclad plan these things. Your opponents will have something to say about this, and there'll be things that you'll have to react to, but you should at least have a kind of a decent idea of what you want to do. Likewise, you need to probably should also spend some time thinking, what do they want to do? I think underdog's going to switch, or I think underdog's going to stay. Where would I put it if I was in their situation? Certainly a good move for them should be not necessarily obvious, but you should be able to narrow it down pretty quickly. They're certainly not going to put the scoring zone in a place they find completely unfavorable to them. And remember, you can always put the scoring zone back in the center. I've done that before too. But it's a great game. It gives you a lot of time to go through it, do a lot with your roster, try things out. And it's a game scenario that I can really recommend. Makes for a great afternoon. And we'll get into more scenarios next week. Like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you much.